So, as I said, I trained testers. I trained around 50 testers groups. They were quite numerous, from 10 to 40 people of various levels, middle ones and senior ones. I take part in different conferences, from 5 to 10 conferences annually. I communicate with people. I learned best experience, which I later implement in my practical work. I have actually a lot of European experience. We here in Russia lag behind with the European best practice. For the last 5 years, I'm working for a company called ODocDoc. We are engaged in digital medical services. One of the best projects that we have is signing up to schedule a doctor's appointment online. More than 2 million patients have already used our service. We are also working with the online drug kits as well as medical recipes, etc. Let's start with Wally. Wally is our tester, only tester who would like to start testing. So far he is happy because he has not yet done anything on the automation training. Maybe he went through a training where he was told that testing is a very simple process. There are certain stages that have to be followed. They are very clear. If to simplify everything, so his expectations were that he starts from point A, that mostly goes to B and C, but reality turns out to be different. It looks like this. And Wally seems a little bit disappointed. Apart from being a QA tester, he also has a number of tools and tasks which he has to solve. He has to test payment services. Payment services have very particular mechanics and configuration. He has to find bugs. He is responsible for apps. He's got Jenkins. He has this IP telephone service. There are such things. Let's say in our case we have more than 100,000 online phone numbers which have to be tested, and which is a fairly challenging task. Also, he has to learn himself. How could he find time to do all of this? Thus, he has only 2 spare hours for testing, and the rest jobs take him another 6 hours. And when somebody from the business development team comes and tells him, well, you have lots of work, you're overloaded with work, and asking, why are you doing all these works during 6 hours, and why are you doing all this manually? The problem is that we waste time for things that we don't really want to do. We expect there'll be other people doing this. Thus, people are simply burning out. Regression tests are different. People like to do it more than other parts. But you have to set up a telephone line and telephone connection. It might take a kind of 3 days to start. If you have to write down the bug record, you have to spend a number of days to realize what stands behind the progress. People burn out very fast, especially in testing. And testing as a job becomes boring because a tester is flooded with tasks and it becomes a routine. Of course, there's the human factor. When people start making mistakes, nobody is safe from making mistakes. Experienced testers also make mistakes. There are also a lot of internal processes. Our company had few processes 5 years ago, but more and more were introduced in the course of time. And because of their complexity and significance, it takes a lot of time to learn all the processes. They're complicated, they're very hard to understand, but sometimes there are dependencies when a tester is not able to work independently. Imagine a tester has to combine a mobile app. A tester cannot do it without the developer's support. A tester can't as well develop a stand or create a test environment, so he has to communicate with an administrator, with the developer. It takes a lot of time. And looks like a tester is just not able to do all of this. Our character, Wally, is sad because he wants to do tests, and Eve comes to help. Eve tells him, hey, Vali, there's a solution. You can use it. I'll tell you briefly what the solutions are. I'll give very general information. So if you have any thoughts when I'm presenting these theses, please note them down and that'll be your conclusions. Number one, unify and automate the tools. Let's take, for instance, a tool or a database which a tester is using. He's called Jira, he's called Jenkins and plugins. There's a Bitrace where we collect mobile apps. There's Threadport Portal, there's SonarCube. All of these are different systems, but please consider them as being one single system. Try to automate and link everything among each other. Our possibilities for integration implementation are within the service itself, but you have to learn. In addition, you would require administrators' access rights. So lead testers or just leads should request administration rights and be independent. There are other kind of add-ons plugin that is API. For instance, these are the plugins used in Jira. GMWE, that's a screenshot, gives the possibility to automate everything against the flow. There's a script language inside. If the possibilities of this inbuilt script language are not sufficient, you can extend and do additional development. Jira Toolkit extends the customs fields a lot. It also gives you a possibility to set up this toolkit fields. There's a scheduler. The scheduler can do certain tasks instead of you. For example, a task to run an auto test at night. You can do it via Scrum, you can do it via Jira. There are also messengers. For example, in our case, we're using Rocket Chat. It's free of charge, just installed in the server, and a lot of things could be integrated. I'll show you examples how we did it. There's also TestRail and any other test management system that you could use, and it should allow for integration, including integration with Jira. If this is not sufficient, there are still scripts available. In our case, we use the scripts via all engineering culture. We store them in JITs. Any developer or tester could open them and adapt based on their needs. The second statement is everything which is inconvenient must be automated. By inconvenient, I mean everything that annoys you and that takes your lot of strength and time from you. All of this could be automated. This statement was born after hearing people talking during the job interview that they were suffering and they were tormenting, but in fact their sufferings and pain could be automated. In Jira we have buttons, and these buttons were connected to the workflow. The first thing that we did is we did an automation. We introduced certain buttons. In Jira status, there's a button when you remain in the same status without actually leaving it, but anyway, some activity is being taken. Any tester, even a junior one who has never opened a console, could run a button, start auto tests, select the one which he needs and start them. So if you need to launch a mobile app or a stand because you would like to test certain app, you could do that, because for some companies it's a pain when there's only the lead engineer.
тем триггером, с какими параметрами запустить систему. Дальше открытие-закрытие стендов мир. Это проблема, которую мы решали, когда мы работаем с интеграторами, например, с кассами, какими-то внешними системами, и у них, чтобы с ними работать, ваше окружение должно быть смотреть в мир, быть открыто к интернету. Раньше это было так, ты бегаешь к эксплуатации, к админам, и просишь их прописать некий айпишник или шлюз, чтобы это можно было сделать. Теперь ты нажимаешь просто кнопку, у тебя открывается стенд мир. Подмержит мастер, так как мы делаем порядка 30 релизов в день, и задачку, например, вам передали вчера, соответственно, немножко подтухло, и вам нужно свежие изменения подтянуть. Если вы совсем не умеете работать с кодом, то это будет для вас проблемой. Но по кнопке, опять же, мастер подмержится, у вас актуальная задачка. Дальше автохуки, которые могут запускаться уже не по кнопке, они запускаются автоматически. Например, мы делаем их на переходы по статусам задач. То есть запуск автотестов у нас происходит, когда разработчик после ревью передал задачу на тестирование, там сразу запустит триггер «Запустить автотесты». Там же срабатывает SonarCube. SonarCube — это статический анализатор кода, который не пропускает задачку до тестирования, в принципе, если она не проходит статику. Создание задач. Этот хук мы используем, когда мы крепимся к какому-то отделу. Например, мне нужно быстро линкованную задачу создать, при этом, чтобы часть описания из таски попала в нее же. То есть заголовок, хедер, какое-нибудь описание, тесты для автоматизаторов, например. Нажимаешь «Создать задачку», она создается сразу с правильным именем, то есть задачка для автоматизации такой-то задачи и с линком. Отправить оповещение, то есть мы хотим при определенных переходах и событиях, чтобы это еще оповещалось нам в чатик. Например, что тесты запустились, что собрался у нас стенд, ну и другие события, которые чуть позже покажу. Дальше есть потушить стенд. Это мы работаем в облаках. То есть когда вы себе собрали стенд, дальше вам надо с ним поработали с задачкой, и когда вы ее оставляете, стенд надо было тушить руками. Теперь, если вы отправляете задачку либо в дефект, либо дальше на выкладку, то стенд тушится автоматически. Ну и, соответственно, автомерж-мастер, то же самое, он происходит, когда тестировщику передает задачку на тестирование. То есть, если ты ее не взял, там 2 дня почему-то она провисела, то ты можешь сделать все равно это руками. Есть еще автопереходы, когда под триггерным, опять же, событием, например, что у нас запустились автотесты, в Jira у нас эти статусы разделены, и можно видеть реально актуальный статус задачи, что она не просто в тестировании, а что у нее идут автотесты, или что автотесты упали, или они прошли.
So maybe they failed or they were successful.
То же самое работает
Done with JIT and is transferred from
the
JIT,
same applies
and it's
to
simply
JIT review.
taken in automatic mode.
Релиз-инженер. Раньше у нас был человек,
Release engineer. We used to have a position in a company of release engineer, but quality assurance specialists wanted to learn more about release engineering, and we decided to automate this process, and we automated the check for abandoned tasks, because sometimes a developer could put into release the tasks that have not been reviewed. It was very complicated to track such tasks down. That's why we applied a script which detects all the tasks in the release, and you can see the status whether the task has been tested or not. We also use email or chat notifications about upcoming release. There's no further need for a team lead to run around announcing that the release is already in place, is ready to be tested. After release is tested, a message and an email is sent confirming that the release is ready for delivery. So, in the backlog, you could see the status of all the bugs available and bugs fixed. After that, you could close all the tasks with the released version by pressing a similar button in Jira. Once you close the release, all tasks connected with it were closed as well, and an email notification was disseminated saying that the release was ready to be sent for production. Then, key idea number 3, any repeated stable process must be automated. If something is not stable, it doesn't require automation. But if a regression that you test in releases lasts for 3 hours or maybe 4 or 5 hours, however, if the process is still unstable, don't automate it. But if you have managed to reach the stability lasting for 2 hours or more, please automate. We also added custom fields to Jira. For instance, people, by people, will managers or task reporters, a reviewer, a tester, designer, and other people who were this way or another responsible for tasks implementation. It is needed because if, imagine you're a tester, you worked with a task, but then you send it to the defect field. After it is back from defect, you would like to continue working with this, but if this task returns back and it's empty, then another tester is working on this task and it will take him time to understand what it was about. But in our case, this task will be returned particularly to you because you're a person who had worked with this before and you know what's it all about. We also have back responses or returns. These are the moments when we check task status, how many times it was returned, what kind of bugs and priority it was assigned with. For instance, you might have tasks that were returned back 10 times. This will also be reflected in the schedule, and you could discuss during a Teams meeting why it occurred. Also, it will be clearly seen if the task is returned having 10 or more bugs each time. It means that you just can't cope with the task. We also created the feel of team because we wanted to have information which team works efficiently and which team is not working efficiently, and to check whether the team performs well. Fidget. We changed from our tool to GitLab, so we just simply build up a new field to show how it works because it's not compliant to Jira easily. And also we added design or design protocol because all documentation that are required for the task to be implemented are to be attached. Then these fields should be stored and regularly updated. Once the tester completed task, your position will be fixed. I can create all the fields. I can create the people, design, and I can split all the tasks related to a particular story, and the tasks will be assigned the same field. And when we talk a task based on condition or based on certain dependencies, we can establish the conditions. For example, a task does not go for implementation further if something has not been done or it has a particular design. Returns give a possibility to check why task is returned back, and it should be treated seriously, especially when a developer would like to take up a new task, but first you tell him, okay, you've got a return task, please handle this one first. There is also returns that come back from review or test or auto test. Usually this is a digital field denoting a return.
Then we have reports. We collect reports into one place to build dashboards. This is a section of the dashboard depicting number of defects time-wise, task-wise, and it tells you how many defects occurred at what time. Next message is that there are no bad people, there's only the system in which they exist. Sometimes people come to you and they do everything wrong. In fact, it's not the people, it's the system where you place them, you make them suffer, you make them hurt. But why do people suffer? They suffer for lack of information, especially if it's someone who is 7 days into the company, he played with buttons and he doesn't know if the tests are running, is he going to get a stand or did something go sideways. So the assembly data is duplicated in Jira. The stand will be ready in 5 minutes. In 5 minutes you'll get a second push. Here's your link. Then it shows what tests have been launched. I remember there was a problem when you push launch test or start a test, but in fact you don't remember what you pre-selected. Especially it was relevant when someone was redoing your task or when we caught a defect in action and we didn't know if it was launched or not. A link to Jenkins assembly, link to results of auto tests, and link to downloading mobile application. It's all in the history of Jira. Anyone can use it. Test starts. We see which tests were started. True false means if tests have been launched or not. And then it tells you if all tests were completed successfully or if there were issues. There is a link to IP. When you want people to fill out certain fields, like a pop-up message, logging, people are gonna miss it or skip that because someone is tied up doing 5 tests at a time. So we make some fields compulsory. If this is a stable process, we put it in the compulsory field. For example, you're doing fixed version or analytics in bug approval. We make sure that we know where the bugs came from, why it was missed, so it's analytical cross-section. Then we have time log that uses commands. We see which ones are loaded and how much time each consumed, let's say 20 hours. And protocol design, people are all compulsory fields so that no one misses out on them. They are the food for automatics, so it's important to have it. Timing. We measure time required for a specific status or when we wait out. Testing wait time. Let's say 2 days ago, a task was sent to test, but still we cannot do anything about it. Time in testing, time in status, time in bug life. There is a field. When it shows status, it gets updated and then a theme is added to it. This is how timing graphs look like. Let's say 10 days for analysis, 24 for coding, and testing 2 days. Someone might come down to you and say, well, you tested too long, that's why you missed the deadline, but in fact, you can argue that it wasn't testing, but rather development that took so much time. Next is test rail. Any test management system can do it. Historically, we like receiving results in auto tests in test rails API. It creates epics as milestones, so we are pegging ourselves to epic. Also, we create a story in a test plan, and then we build regression, then that delivers auto test results and comments in log links. You can either start the test or choose any status that you like. Another thing that we did was creating bugs out of test rail into Jira. Jira is a bit slow on a cloud, so if you found a bug in test rail, then we map fields that we want to transmit, set it up in test rail, so it automatically delivers a description of failing auto tests. For example, you know that in step 3 you got stuck. Then we add project where to send this, type of task, component, and priority. So there is a double benefit. You create a bug quickly, and it falls into analytics. Then you can parse it. There are links at the bottom that show it immediately. This is how it looks in Jira with test trail access. And here you can see the results of test and linking. Number 5, mostly designed for test managers. Do not distribute work. Who distributes work? Allocates work. We don't do that. When leads come in and tell us this is how your workload is distributed, in our case, the system does it. And we use a chat for that, notices that come into it. I don't run around telling people what to do. There is a bot that does it. He's a time manager. If a certain task is in active status for 3 days, he makes sure that you are not behind schedule. Bugs can be created by any person, and we want to fix it quickly. If there is an incident, we must analyze it, understand if it's bug or not, and put it into work. Then there are general tasks that go beyond commands. In commands, all your tasks are yours. But if there are general tasks, no one wants to test them. Or if there is one enthusiast who does it for everybody else. Also, there is a test case review, which we take out of test trail. Typically, we would take it out of test trail, put it in someone's personal mail. In fact, this is how an example of notices looks. There is a queue that you have to wait. If you don't finish your bug, then push-up notices will start nagging you until you do. Then there is a summary that I receive once a day at 2:30 p.m. for all pending tasks. So I know that one is pending for 230 hours, so it should have been done yesterday. Test trail can send different notices. This is how we send test case review. And there is an immediate notice in the chat. We also have a tittle-tattle bot to make sure that unsure processes are addressed. Sometimes it's difficult to address them. So there is a tittle-tattle that says, we agreed on this bug, but you didn't do it, and then people respond to explain why there was a delay. So our QA spends about 7 hours for testing and 1 hour for everything else. And we are flying forward with the support of the engineer. So the tasks are never frozen, never delayed. We keep our tabs on the status. We also untie their hands for self-learning or for some other cool stuff like analysis or implementation of things that they care about. We downplay the human factor. Plus, people no longer forget things, they're always reminded. And the independence of QA. QA is independent of development or ops. We can do everything ourselves. Thank you for your attention, your questions. Thank you for your presentation. Who was responsible for fine-tuning automation of such processes, or the entire team did it? Was it spontaneous or pre-planned? Good question. First, people complained about some fields, and you realize that something needs to be done. And you don't want people to burn out or to be sad, and you start thinking about how to help them out. So I was the one who drove activity. It's great to have administrators' rights. You can set things up regardless of anybody else. And then when we felt the profit, we dug deeper into development. We apply the same strategy, and then business took note of that, and they wanted to have the same thing. Hey, I have one question. I just imagined for a second you added a lot of stuff in Jira. At some point, it might look like a cockpit in an aircraft. Don't you think there is an overload of information? On the one hand, I like to have everything in one place, but if you add testing, linkages to releases and everybody else. In fact, we use tabs to divide this material. So everything looks rather clean and nice. Also, there is a work log tab. So we have top tabs and bottom tabs. So at some point you did run into too much information to me, yeah? And then we addressed that by organizing tabs. I like your chat, but any mailing, when it's massive, you stop noticing, you stop paying attention to it. I mean, you keep seeing notices that this is due, this is overdue, and you just ignore it. Let it burn. Yes, when there's too many messages, you become less attentive. Therefore, we try to filter it. At some point, we delete unnecessary messages. I, for one, receive only a summary, a daily summary. So both disciplines and the messages from tittle is sufficient for me. Sometimes people write Jira into your personal account. Thank you, Ruslan. Did you drive these changes in your extra time, or is it part of your duties? I don't distinguish between my duties and free time. I work 24/7, so it's both. Thank you for your report. 2 questions. Did you try to automate creating test data to improve testers' routine and creating bugs as a result of sprinting? Yes, we do this via API, but mostly for auto tests. For manual tests, we don't do that because there is not a lot of it around. And you do that via Jira? No, we didn't pack it into Jira. We take it from Confluence, and then via console you prepare the data that you need. And for the second question, creating bugs based on sprints. We tried to do that, but Jira got loaded full of bugs. We tried to catch out of monitoring, but then there'll be some push messages. But at some point, we've stopped this practice. Thank you for your talk. Could you elaborate about that squealer or tattletale? These are some agreements, but they're not very stern. He helps let you know that all your accords or all your agreements are being well observed. So you will come to people and ask, how come you are not doing this? So that Tatler doesn't collect data via Jira, it collects data from everything. Thank you for your talk. My question is about bug assignment. Do you apply middle, junior, senior range when it comes to case management and case distribution? Do you take into account expertise of testers? We don't account for that automatically. If there is a heavy bug and it takes you 1 hour to fix, then you'll get pushed. And if you can't clear it out in 2 hours, then you'll get assistance from somebody else. So the bot handles that indirectly. Yes, because the bot says that someone is unable to fix it. The time is up, or do we have one more? Question again is about that squealer or tattletale. Wouldn't it be easier to make person make good on the commitment made, as opposed to elevating this matter and then forcing that person to do it? You see that this is an experiment, because but still this is looped. Yeah, but the person is not suffering. No one is pushing that individual every day. Once the process becomes stable, there are no longer pushes. The squealer tells you or informs you that a process is not working. And then, of course, you can go around punishing people, bitching around, telling them bad stories. So it's up to you. You can either make a command or elevate, but we try to avoid any suffering. I didn't receive the answer that I was looking for, but thanks anyway. It's just as long as it is an agreement, you don't honor it strictly.